The story of Cyberpunk 2077. From an absolute disaster that got memed into oblivion to one of the greatest redemption stories in gaming.
Cyberpunk 2077 was basically the Hindenburg of video games when it came out. It was
The Hindenburg, for those of you who do not know, was a Zeppelin. And the reason we don't have Zeppelins anymore is before the Hindenburg, humanity did not exactly understand that Zeppelins are really good at burning.
was a huge disaster that everybody talked about due to its lack of precedent and the severity of the images that were produced about it. But somehow, several years later, it is a well-liked and respected game with very positive reviews, both recently
mostly because Mommy Songbird in the 2.0 update
and overall on Steam. How did that happen? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on Game Ranks, how Cyberpunk 2077 did the impossible. So, back before this game came out, the hype was out of control. The expectations for CD Projekt Red's newest game were through the roof, and why would they not be through the roof? These guys...
The only thing that absolutely blew Cyberpunk's hype out of the water was obviously only GTA 6. After GTA 6, it's Cyberpunk all the way. There has never been a game with bigger hype than Cyberpunk except GTA 6. That's it. These are the two most hyped games of ever. Now you could argue that Diablo 4 kind of makes the list, and Elder Scrolls 6 is, kind of hyped. Admittedly, now most people are worried about Elder Scrolls 6 being a disaster, considering it's on the same engine as Starfield, and Starfield's shit. But, still.
Knocked it out of the park with The Witcher 3, and Cyberpunk was going to be their most ambitious game yet. To say that people were excited would be a massive understatement. Players were
Dude, they had Keanu Reeves. He's awesome.
Frothing at the mouth to see this thing. The developers had been really tight-lipped about what was actually in the game, leading to a lot of rampant speculation among the fan base.
Oh, man. This got people hooked, yo.
Don't set expectations, especially for games like this, then fans are gonna set their own. And when that happens, even the best games need to beware, and Cyberpunk 2077, at least at release, was not one of the best games. It was not even, technically speaking, a good game.
It was barely a game.
Complete game. A game in a condition that could be acceptably released, even in an era where people are used...
Dude! The bugs were legendary. There were so many soft locks in the game where you could literally no longer progress. There were some situations where you were in a scripted corner and an enemy spawns that's not supposed to spawn, and it leaves a carcass behind that's untraversable, and that's it. You can't do anything. Your path is blocked forever unless you cheat through walls or something. It was amazing. Dude, the AI, the everything, the animations, the log. Oh, Cyberpunk was an absolute pleasantry. Now, admittedly, nothing really hits as hard home as Fallout 76, because if you missed that debacle, man, you missed it hard. Because Cyberpunk 2077 was only second in the amount of bugs it had compared to Fallout 76. I mean, wow. Man, good times. Good times.
Used to games launching in a state and getting patched. The game released on December 10th, 2020, to mostly positive reviews. Some reviewers went so far as to call it a contender for the best game ever made, like this infamous review from Windows Central, but that positivity would not last. Players who actually got the final product were not happy. The game was a buggy mess and looked terrible on consoles, and it wasn't actually all that much better on PC. The game...
I mean, let's be real, everything's terrible on consoles. Also, GTA 6 currently is planned to only be on consoles, and let me just explain it like this. If GTA 6 comes out in 5 years, it's going to be 20 years until there's a console that's actually powerful enough to run GTA 6 on 5 frames per second, okay? So, it's going to be a struggle.
game was in many ways just flat out broken at launch, extremely rough around the edges. This was not the game that CD Projekt Red promised us, and players weren't just disappointed, they were angry, and controversies endlessly swirled around this game. Investors sued, consumers put together a class action.
Investors actually sued, consumers did. I was speculating that CDPR could actually go out of business because, man, they lost a lot of money. They lost a tremendous amount of money, and depending on how much they had banked from The Witcher, it was actually a legitimate possibility that they could go down under as a company because there's just too many negative things happening, and they're not winning. They're not winning. I don't know what was the actual outcome, but they were probably. I would be surprised if they won the investor lawsuit because let's be real, they lied. They blatantly lied to the investors. Okay, and they lied to pretty much everyone. There was a refund also for Cyberpunk 2077 possible on Steam, which was crazy.
Action lawsuit claiming false advertising. Sony literally pulled the game from digital sales for a while. And actually, Xbox put a giant warning on the game's store page, warning players about the game's buggy state. CD Projekt Red had data stolen and ransomed. A reviewer actually suffered a seizure from watching one of the brain dance sequences in the
Elisa Favis. I mean, of course Alyssa would do that.
Game. There was actually originally no epilepsy warning in the game, which is kind of shocking because those are not new. Like, the whole thing was just bad news on top of bad news on top of bad news. The inevitable Jason...
Epilepsy warnings. I mean, you have to figure out sooner or later that you have epileptic seizures. So, I think Cyberpunk at least... Hey, Cyberpunk saved you a visit to the doctor's office, my boy, so it is what it is.
Schreier expose painted a picture of a studio in crisis. In those first few months after the game came out, it seemed like there was no future for the company or the game. It was just one disaster after another. Sure, They promised to do right and make updates to the game, but I mean, how often do developers follow through on that? Consumer expectations are low for this kind of a thing, and for a reason. Somebody who would develop and release a game in this state for that price without saying anything, literally just allowing a big hype train to sell millions of copies of their game, it doesn't seem honest, and, it's happened a lot of times before.
Doesn't seem honest. Well, no. Oh man, that's deep.
And it took a while, but now, just about 3 years after launch, I think we can safely say they managed to do the impossible. They took a game with a reputation that was unsalvageable and turned it around. For a long time, Cyberpunk was the...
Yeah, they literally turned it around, man. They even had warnings that said, hey, the game's not going to be playable on lower-end PCs now because we actually are going to put in the graphics that we promised. So, low-end PCs, there's nothing we can do about this, but you're kind of done.
The punching bag of the gaming media, the easiest of easy targets, and you can see it anywhere. Look up any random listicle from about 2021, and you'll see the writer include a catty dig at the game's expense because it was a safe joke to make. And this includes your old pal Falcon the Game Bird and everybody else at Game Ranks. I'm not saying that to say that we were wrong. In fact, it deserved it. It was generally assumed to be a failure because of how bad it was. Thankfully, looking back, they were actually serious about fixing the game, but it did take a while because, it was like that. It was, like that. Like
he just walks through the door. Dude, the Cyberpunk and walking animations and running and AI bugs, man, those were just some legendary things. Oh, man, it was good stuff, boys.
You can see on the screen right now. That's not like fix it in a couple of days broken. A lot of other publishers and developers wouldn't even bother. They would just write the game off and move on to their next project, hoping that it turns out better. But CD Projekt Red knew that there was more than that writing on this. They recognized that if they were going...
Oh, yeah. It was the first original thing CD Projekt Red did. If they did not fix it, even a new Witcher release would not mean anything to them because their reputation would be so hard in the dirt no one would care.
going to remain a successful company, they needed to turn this game around and restore consumer trust in their brand. It's a playback they've gone back to many times, actually, but the stakes have never been this high. Like, if you remember the original Witcher game when it came out back in 2007, to call it rough would be a kind way of putting it. It wasn't the mess that Cyberpunk was at release, but it was pretty.
The original Witcher sold good because people knew that there's naked women there. And it worked, by the way. It worked.
Bad, and the translation was awkward as hell. So in 2008, 1 year later, they revamped the game with Witcher Enhanced Edition, which fixed a lot of issues that the players had with a free update and did a lot to make the game better, and that translated to improved sales. If they hadn't done that, they wouldn't have been able to make Witcher 2, and certainly not Witcher 3, which, by the way, Witcher 3 also had issues at release. From bugs to a downgrading scandal. I would not say it caused the kind of controversy that Cyberpunk 2077 did. Honestly, not even the controversy that Witcher 1 caused, which, I mean, pound for pound, was actually something. It's not like Witcher was as big a game as Cyberpunk 2077, so not as many people were paying attention. But this isn't CD Projekt Red's first revamp rodeo, is what I'm saying. Now, the thing about Cyberpunk 2077 is that, while the zeitgeist around the game was extremely negative in 2020, it did still have its fans. With a game this size, it's just inevitable that among the haters, there are also going to be defenders. It's highly anticipated.
Not a lot of people defended this game when it came out. I do not remember actually anyone defending it. I know some people played it, and some people kept playing it, and some people played it through. But man, people did not defend this game at all. I don't remember people defending it. Yeah, every bad game has its insane defenders, you know? Starfield, the day before, you always have that. But I don't remember people defending Cyberpunk. That was crazy.
People have both emotionally and monetarily invested time and money into it, and also it isn't as though it's not an attempt at something. It's easy to say that the complaining around the game was hyperbolic at the time, because some was. That's just inevitable when you get into games discourse, but the game had serious problems too. Now, the state of Cyberpunk 2077 on consoles was abysmal. There's no way around it. The decision to release the game for PS4 and Xbox One without a next-gen update was a boneheaded move. Like, they should have just delayed it. On PS4, the game was horribly ugly at times, and the bugs were non-stop.
It was not supposed to be played at those consoles. That's the thing. They released it because it doesn't. They should have understood that they're gonna get sued or something like that is gonna happen. That's the craziest part. They still released it knowing full well it's gonna be a disaster. Just don't release it. Save yourself some lawsuit trouble.
Low-res textures were very common. There was constant stuttering. Character models would get screwed up. Cutscenes would play wrong. You couldn't play the game for more than 2 minutes without encountering a visual bug of some kind. Gameplay also was seen as a disappointment. The shooting was solid, but the skill tree was...
Yeah, the shooting was solid. That's why people sticked with it. But people who played Melee, as much as I understand, a lot of them left. It wasn't fun, it wasn't satisfying, there was no impact, it was pretty sad. And yes, this system was kind of boring.
It was confusing and unsatisfying. The enemy AI was just worthless, plain bad, crap. Like, just crap, honestly. Many open world features people have come to expect also just weren't there at launch. The world felt lifeless because there was no real reactivity. There was barely any police response at times. The world was stuffed with boring points of interest without much to do of any substance, and the armor system made it so that everybody had to dress like a clown. Driving wasn't a lot of fun, huh?
Yeah, that was funny. That was funny.
Either cars were stiff to control. They were buggy.
They were horrible to control. People are saying, the cars at the start would. It was the worst snow physics you had ever experienced, but the caveat is there was no snow.
Else. It was a game that didn't seem to know what its strengths were, so everything gameplay related just felt off. Now, there was a solid core, at very least. Night City was one of the best designed open world cities ever, and each district just felt totally unique and visually interesting. The story was solid as well, even if there were definitely too many scenes of people just talking without a lot else going on. It was a game that could conceivably be fixed, but it took a long...
I mean, the story of Cyberpunk 2077 is pretty decent at the bare minimum, most people will definitely say. I mean, it completely blows out of the water, honestly, almost any recent story of a AAA game. What have we actually had recently? We have had the COD, which people hate the newest COD. Warzone 3. Call of Duty Warzone 3, that one. Starfield, Golem, and what else? I'm not even sure there is anything else. Diablo 4's story was so forgettable I still don't know what exactly happened. It was boring. Some of the characters spoke so slow. It was so annoying. This is how slow... Yeah, that was the problem. If you could speed up the dialogue of Diablo 4's campaign by, I don't know, 25% on default, except Mephisto. Mephisto did a good job. Whoever did Mephisto, you're a good one. Okay? But everything else was garbage. So, Cyberpunk's story is gold compared to, honestly, most things that are currently coming out that are story-based or driven.
Long time. The game saw a lot of small updates and bug fixes for the first few months, but the first major overhaul patch took way longer to come out.
True.
Like, the game didn't start seeing significant improvements until 2022. In February, they put out the next-gen upgrade on consoles that gave the game enhanced graphics, faster loading times, and a much more stable frame rate. It was free and...
Well, the thing is, you can't rush these things. You have released a half-baked shit product that required probably 3 years for you to legitimately finish. Yeah, you're not gonna make it good, playable, and whatnot in a year. Okay, that's just not happening.
Obviously, it should have been. And the response, at least what I saw, was tepidly positive, which is saying a lot, actually. It sounds like I'm saying very little, but when you talk about a game that was as constantly ripped on as Cyberpunk 2077, saying that the response to something related to it was tepidly positive is actually major. But even so, that wasn't really what changed the attitude around the game. Something entirely different did. Originally announced back in June.
I was waiting to see if he's gonna say this. Edgerunners. Dude. Bruh. Okay? You got Davey, you got Lucy, you got... I forgot everyone's favorite crazy big arm shooty girlfriend's name. What was her name? I forgot. I can't remember. Anyway, you got all of that, dude. Cyberpunk Edgerunners, if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. It's absolutely a treat. It is absolutely a treat. And this thing, single-handedly, was actually the first point of redemption for Cyberpunk. People watched this, and they played the game. I'm still listening to the... is it Lucy theme song? I'm still listening to that theme song still to this day in my car while I'm driving. It's on my playlist. It's so good.
2020, months before.
What's the name of that song? I probably won't find it in my playlist like this because I don't know what's the name of it. But if I remember the name, I'll share it.
Before the final game of Cyberpunk even came out, Edgerunners, a collaboration between CD Projekt and Studio Trigger, the anime studio responsible for stuff like Little Witch Academia, SSS Gridman, Promare, Kill la Kill, the list goes on. The show didn't even come out until mid-2022, but it ended up being perfect timing for the developers because it came out when opinions were just starting to turn. So there was actually some real interest in this Netflix adaptation, and yeah, Studio Trigger came...
Oh, I found it. I really want to stay at your house. Just Google that. There you go. Cyberpunk, I really just want to stay at your house. There you go. You're welcome. There you go. That's the soundtrack. That's the best thing ever, okay? It is amazing. And I think I have another soundtrack of Edgerunners, but that's fine.
Can be kind of hit or miss with their shows, but this one was a hit. It got great reviews all around and an overall positive audience reception, and a lot of people consider it one of the best video game adaptations of all time. And I don't think it can be understated.
It was not an adaptation. You can't really call it an adaptation. It was a video game spin-off.
Just how much this show did for Cyberpunk 2077. Like, it turned a lot of people around on the game and on the setting. It's a solid anime. Like,
yeah,
it's
there
actually
you go.
really good and does a whole lot to expand the setting. And as far as video game media goes, we're used to, like, good games getting bad adaptations, and this was a huge anomaly. A game that people
Rebecca, there we go.
knew as bad got a great adaptation, and it showed the things about
What? Maybe Lucy's a piece of shit, but you know, I'm still Team Lucy. Shut up.
the game that were good. And again, in the meantime, CD Projekt Red had worked on making the game itself good. It did still have its problems, but it was getting better. The same year, September 6, 2022, CD Projekt Red announced their biggest addition to the game yet, an expansion titled Phantom Liberty. And momentum was on their side, but this was going to be the true make it or break it point for the game. These guys are known for some
I don't think it was a make it or break it point for the game, honestly. When Phantom Liberty got announced, I didn't even hear about it. I don't think people cared about Phantom Liberty. Cyberpunk did make its comeback, but one of the second big reasons why Cyberpunk won so big and people talked about it so much was because of the collapse of Starfield. Because Starfield Starfield was so bad that no one who wanted to experience anything stayed at it. And people who wanted to experience a futuristic story and use futuristic weapons and whatnot, a lot of those people went to Cyberpunk because of it. The rest that wanted space exploration went to No Man's Sky. But yeah, Starfield also needs to be thanked for the resurrection of Cyberpunk because it did a lot. The absolute disaster that it was got people talking about Cyberpunk before the 2.0 update even hit.
of the best DLC in the business. Like, the add-ons for Witcher 3 had excellent stories. They're huge and they were cheap. It kind of seemed impossible that they'd be able to match that quality, but they did. Somehow, the Madmen did it. Days before that expansion came out, they released the highly anticipated patch 2.0, which overhauled many.
Yeah, and 2.0 already was huge. People loved it, so because they did this really smartly, by the way. They released 2.0, which was a major hit. Everyone loved it, and then they released Phantom Liberty, which was a absolute 10 out of 10 banger with Mommy Songbird.
Many main aspects of the game. There was an actual wanted level system, police can hunt you, the skill tree is remade from the ground up and becomes much more interesting. How Chrome works was completely changed and also more interesting. Now you can equip a ton of cyberware, but there's a limit depending on your level. Clothing no longer affects armor. You can just wear whatever you want. No more mix and match clown outfits. You're actually allowed to just like...
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. If you're wearing this around your neck and you have, like, I don't know, what is this, a battery pack? Did we really move away from the clown outfits? Or were the clown outfits always a part of us? Yeah, I think, you know, you didn't exactly move away from the clown outfits.
Try to curate yourself a cool character. You know, what role-playing generally is about. The AI was upgraded, so it's more aggressive, it's more interesting to fight. Net running is more viable, and also just better. Loot's more rare, and also more interesting. I mean, we could just keep repeating
Everything
things
was
that
better,
could have been
essentially.
interesting became interesting. But enemies scale to your level. The list kind of, it keeps going. In some games, even massive changelogs like this one don't actually make the game feel that different, but for Cyberpunk, it feels like a new game, a better game. With 2.0, the devs looked at the game and really seemed to think about what people like about the game and what they were left wanting. Character building feels more important and interesting with 2.0, and in general, the game is just a lot more fun to actually play, which sounds like an obvious thing. Make the game more fun, but I mean, that's easier said than done, is it not? But the thing about 2.0 is that it was completely free. They fulfilled their promise of fixing the game, and with Phantom Liberty, they went above and beyond. If there's any reason to play Cyberpunk, it's actually for Phantom Liberty, which is not just a fantastic expansion, it's easily in the running for the best game of the year. In a year as stacked as 2023, that is high praise. Any issues the game...
It's most likely the second best game, obviously behind Baldur's Gate.
Originally had are just gone. Its story is fantastically paced. There's no dry scenes of exposition anymore. You're always going around doing something new, getting into other...
Oh no, don't show this! Dude, when Phantom Liberty was coming out, the sword... Oh no. Oh, they're not. Dude, these SWAT scenes always required YouTube to manually review videos when they came out, and this was the only thing that you could show from Phantom Liberty. And yeah, man, the SWAT decapitations triggered YouTube's automated system instantly. It was such a pain.
Situations or fighting some new enemy. It's both more exciting than the main game and more emotionally gripping. Idris Elba is fantastic as Solomon Reed, and Keanu Reeves steps it up as Johnny Silverhand. He's good in the regular game, but he's even better here. Like, he's got some really affecting scenes in this expansion. It's got some great set pieces.
He's not a clown, essentially. That's what he's trying to say. He's not just a comic relief clown. He actually gives context and depth to situations.
Moments and missions as
well.
Which
is good.
I'd almost describe it as the best Call of Duty campaign Activision never made, because the story is so fast-paced and exciting, but that's selling Phantom Liberty short. Yeah, it's not the cheapest. It's $30 on top of the base game price, but in my opinion, the DLC makes the game so much more worth it. Even the side missions are great. It's set in a different district. It's called Dogtown. It's a section of the city that's been taken over by the mercenary company Barghest. The expansion, it just feels completely different from the standard game. Rather than your standard Cyberpunk story about evil corporations, Phantom Liberty is more about the politics of the setting and revolves around themes of duty, patriotism, and freedom. It's a dense narrative with a lot going on, and it pulls some of the most impressive tricks I've ever seen in a game by having two completely different ending missions depending on what decision you make. Both of these missions are absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, I almost forgot about that. Yeah, you have a reason to replay this one. Okay? You have a reason to completely replay and make the other choices just to see what happens, which is kind of good, because that is not a thing previously. One of the things they actually initially sold Cyberpunk as was every decision made matters, you know, every decision, you know, you take makes a difference in the... It doesn't. But here it actually does.
And are worth experiencing regardless of what direction you want to take the story. They're as different as can be, while both being fully featured, story-heavy segments. They really make it feel like your choices matter in this one, and that's saying a lot. What can happen in the end can change a lot, and they all feel like the true ending, if you get what I mean. There isn't corner cutting with this stuff. It's very impressive. The DLC starts off with your character being promised a solution to their problem, the problem they still have at the end of the damn main game, and the DLC actually ties into the main game pretty seamlessly in that way, and in the end, you fulfill your end of the bargain and actually get what you want. The DLC includes an entirely new ending for the base game, and it's one of the best endings I've ever seen in a game, no joke. You'd think that's where they'd stop, but they had a little bit more gas in the tank, in what is being described as the last major update.
Oh yeah, the 2.1 update.
To the game.
Jeez.
Patch 2.1 will
They just don't stop, huh?
finally make it possible to ride the metro system, something people have been complaining about for years. You can even ride it in real time if you want. You know how the game sold like 20 million units back in 2022?
Again, for all of those people who don't understand this, I'm not gonna ever even do that. You're not probably ever gonna do that. Most people are maybe gonna do it once, and that's it. But knowing that you can adds to the experience. It's like Starfield. The people who said, oh, you don't actually want to traverse all the planet and see nothing on it. Yeah, obviously, if I knew that I can actually make it around the planet, I would never even attempt that thing. Only maybe a handful of people would unironically try to attempt to do that. But knowing the fact that you can do these things adds so much to the experience. Knowing that you can gives the illusion, at least, of freedom. And that's worth a lot.
Post Phantom Liberty, you can bump that up to 25 million. All from the expansion and the 2.0 update. It took a while, but they finally pulled it off. The game is in a significantly better state now, and people seem overall happy with it. It's still not perfect, it's not the GTA, but in the future, some people wanted it to be back in 2020, but now some of the initial anger about the game has fallen into a memory hole. It's not hard to look back at a lot of the response from a few years ago and see it as overblown, a symptom of the gaming community's love of catastrophizing, but the game really did have a ton
It's still always funny.
of problems back when it came out. And the company's practices leading up to the game's release were at very least questionable, possibly deceptive. Those investors that sued them actually got a payout of $1.85 million.
So little? Wow! Not a lot of investors probably did that in that case. Oof. Because the stock went down a lot, by the way. Their stock went down like 20-30% or something like that, if I remember correctly. Anyway, that's pretty much it. That was Game Ranks. Very, very good stuff. Cyberpunk 2077. What a redemption story, boys. From trash and rags to riches and you know, the B word. Anyway, this was Closer to the Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.